Please be seated. On a recent trip to the West Coast to visit my Willow's family, I found myself traveling back in time and forward in time and then completely out of time itself. And I'm not talking about jet lag. In addition to staying at Willow's sister's house and her family in Portland for a few days, we drove across the state to my mother-in-law's house, an hour east of Spokane, Washington. You may have heard me describe how my wife Willow grew up in the past, but maybe not. So let me say this. She came by her name honestly. Her parents, after spending some time living in a Hare Krishna commune, were part of the Back to the Land hippie movement of the 1970s. Shortly before Willow was born, they had acquired a tract of land 3 miles off the highway on a dirt road that contained nothing but rocks, pine trees, and a natural spring that was the key to making this a settlement. Before they built their cabin, they planted a large garden to grow all of their own food, and they dug out the side of a hill to create a root cellar to store their preserved and canned food. And while they were building their cabin, they lived temporarily in a teepee, kind of like we heard about the tents in the reading from Hebrews today. And it was this teepee which was Willow's first home when they brought her home from the hospital in September. September, mind you, they had to rush to get that cabin built before winter. Their cozy cabin, heated by 2 wood-burning stoves, including one for cooking, has never had electricity or indoor plumbing, and did not get a telephone until Willow was 11 years old. Their arduous life out there has always been about simplicity and sustenance. When my father-in-law, Mark, died a couple years ago, we weren't exactly sure how to proceed. Could Willow's mom survive there by herself? I can tell you she's not interested in living anywhere else. She told us this time that she has a serious suspicion of flush toilets. Doesn't trust them. But the question remains a live one. What to do? Since she heats exclusively with wood, the boys and I got down to business during our visit, splitting a couple of cords of wood and stacking it neatly in her expansive woodshed. This was always the chief chore I had as I've visited over the last 30 years. Usually, Mark, my father-in-law, would have girdled the tree so it would die in advance, and it would dry standing up. And we'd drop it together, and he'd buck it up into rounds of 20 inches long that would fit perfectly into the stove. And I'd spend days splitting it up and hauling it to the woodshed while he did his day job at the Forest Service. I remember acutely my first few visits, where the feel of my novice arms swinging that axe would always lead to a miss and a shattered axe handle. This seemed to happen every trip, but Mark would always encourage me, assuring me that he did the same thing now and again. That always seemed doubtful to me. He'd bring a spare axe out and then disappear into his workshop to work on replacing that shattered handle. This year, as we were there working away, with the satisfying sound of wood splitting apart and thudding to the ground, and the sweet smell of the released pitch wafting in the air, the inevitable happened. Aiden swung and missed, and the axe handle shattered. As I exchanged the broken axe with a replacement, I found myself traveling back in time and forward in time and then out of time completely. As I walked into Mark's shop to work on replacing the handle of the axe, my heart was filled with a deep sense of loss, but brimming with gratitude. In his shop, I discovered a grand array of his tools, eagerly waiting to be picked up again. There was everything I needed for the task at hand. I also witnessed all the unfinished projects beside the workbench. As I secured the axe head into the vise to hammer out the remains of the broken ash handle, I found my existence blurring. Standing in Mark's place, in his workshop, I felt his grandfatherly presence, patiently preparing yet another axe, this time for his grandson. I also experienced his fatherly acceptance, that it stood in the same spot, mending my mistakes. And I was grateful to stand in for him and to play my role, to extend a loving legacy, and reliving and reviving a memory that pulled me in and outside of time. The experience reminded me of a beautiful essay by the poet David Whyte, entitled Memory. He writes, "Memory is not just a then, recalled in a now. The past is never just the past. Memory is a pulse, passing through all created life, a waveform, and then a then continually becoming other thens, all the while creating a continual but almost untouchable now." But the Guru's simplistic urge to live only in the now misunderstands the multi-layered inheritance of existence, where all epochs live and breathe in parallel. Whether it be the epochal moment initiated by the appearance of the first hydrogen atoms in the universe, or the first glimpse of adulthood perceived in adolescence. Memory passes through an individual life like a building musical waveform, or a cry of a child, constantly maturing, increasing, virtuosic, often volatile, sometimes overpowering. Every human life holds the power of this immense inherited pulse, holds and then supercharges it according to the way that we inhabit our identities in the untouchable now. He continues, "Memory is an invitation to the source of our life, to a fuller participation in the now, to a future about to happen, but ultimately to a frontier identity that holds them all at once. Memory makes the now fully inhabitable. The genius of human memory is firstly its very creation through experience, and then the way that it is laid down in the mind according to the identity that we inhabited when we first decided to remember, and then its outward radiating effect, and then all its possible future outcomes occurring all at the same time. We actually inhabit a memory as a living threshold, as a place of choice and volition and imagination, a crossroads where our future diverges according to how we interpret, or perhaps more accurately, how we live the story we've inherited. Memory is the living link to personal freedom." Standing in Mark's workshop, I was given a glimpse into that place of memory where we store up true treasures born of love and relationship. Yes, loss has a way of showing us what's truly important in life. The absence is the very birth of hope and faith. And I think that's what today's scriptures are all about. The vision of the prophet Isaiah shows that God is not interested in our many ceremonies or self-important sacrifices. No, the Holy One is interested in the harmonious relationship of justice and goodness, something that seems rarely encountered in the world. But it is the very hope of God's reign. Although it's hidden, we're called to strive for it. As the letter to the Hebrews suggests, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. In today's gospel, St. Luke continues to present a Jesus who's relentlessly expounding on the themes we've been wrestling with the last couple of weeks. Again, Jesus is calling our attention to living life in relationship with the eternal now, often called the reign of God. We're invited to depend upon God for our daily sustenance, as he taught us how to pray just 2 weeks ago. Give us this day our daily bread. And we're commanded to give up our self-aggrandizing and personal empire-building projects that tear down our current barns so we might build bigger ones. But in these two groupings of stories in today's gospel, Jesus gets a little darker, a more apocalyptic. As such, he starts off with a word of comfort. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. As we have seen, the reign of God is offered and available now, even as its fullness is anticipated in the world to come. But we're not given this kingdom for our own pleasure or self-fulfillment. No, the divine reign is participatory. It allows us to play a living part in creating relationships that matter. We are all invited to stand in the place that Jesus stood, to extend his loving legacy, just like I stood in my father-in-law's place. Everything is given to us so we might give it to someone else. This might just be the point of God's generosity, to lead us to participate in the subversive economy of the kingdom. Perhaps this involves selling possessions, giving alms, and storing up treasure in heaven, so we can freely redistribute our material resources in alignment with the priority of God's reign, taking care of the widow, the orphans, and the immigrant. Or maybe it's enough to let go of all the fear of scarcity and insecurity that blocks us from living into the fullness of life, here and now. How is your fear blocking you from being present this morning? How is your worry distracting you from God's generosity? How are your own petty concerns making you miss out on the grandeur of all of this? I wonder if you can remember a time or an experience of sheer generosity that melted away all your fears and anxieties. Can you think of a relationship of such kindness and love that you were disarmed of your constant need to prove yourself? Maybe it's a parent or a grandparent who you're thinking of, who showered you with love and care, perhaps cookies as well. Perhaps it was a friend or a partner who simply saw your great need and didn't walk away. Whatever the experience, this simple moment of generosity might just be the crack in the door that allows you to enter into a new way of being. For me, the memory of my father-in-law is the key to unlocking my participation in God's generous reign. As David White suggests, we actually inhabit memory as a living threshold, as a place of choice and volition and imagination, a crossroads where future diverges according to how we interpret, or perhaps more accurately, how we live the story we have inherited. These stories that Jesus tells about a master returning unexpectedly and thieves breaking in to steal are pressing reminders to live into the true story that he demonstrated by his very living. Pointing to loss, Jesus invites us to find abundance here and now. His abundance of living a life marked for others, creates the very path for us to do the same. Jesus invites us into his workshop and he's got all the tools arrayed, all the tools we need to live generously, to walk in justice and kindness. When we accept his love and his care, we find ourselves traveling back in time, and then forward in time, and then completely out of time itself, into the very heart of the reign of God. This morning, we're invited to ask ourselves, what truly matters to us? What are our lives for? Where is your treasure? You don't have to spend too much time searching. Just pay attention to your heart. You'll notice that it's filled with many memories, living memories of what the kingdom of God looks like. Memories that you can live out as you are primed to make more of yourself. God's love lives in us, waiting to generously pour itself out into the world. Live the story now, and let a little bit more of God's reign be present in you and the world today. Amen.